Hi everyone, thanks for joining me on another technique video, and in this one I'm going to show you how to do the provisional cast on using the crochet hook where you're actually putting the stitches on the provisional stitches themselves on the needle using the crochet hook. Now provisional cast ons are good because it allows you to keep your stitches at the cast on edge on a provisional cast on, so they're live stitches, and then that way you can keep knitting your work, and at the end of that you can unravel this provisional cast on and pick up those stitches, so you have live stitches on both ends. This is a great technique if you want to then potentially join those two live stitches together, seam them together, or if you want to add an edging on this end and then also an edging on this end. That way you've got live stitches and you can work off of both ends. So that's a great use of putting on a provisional cast on. I've previously shown the provisional cast on using the crochet hook where you just make a chain and pick up the stitches off of the chain. So this one is different from that. If you're interested in that video, I've provided a link in the description field as well as at the end of this video. So let me show you how that's done. Now to do, obviously you need a crochet hook to do a provisional cast on, and you're going to need your needles. So I have here a size H hook. You want to use a hook that's going to be good for the yarn. Your scrap yarn. So you're going to need a piece of scrap yarn to do your provisional cast on stitches, and then obviously you're going to need your regular yarn. So first thing you want to do is just leave a little bit of a tail and make a slip knot. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and put a knot in this tail so that we can identify this as our starting point for our crochet chain. Okay, that's our slip knot end. And now we're going to go ahead and chain just 4. Now you don't really need to know crochet for this because we're just using a very basic thing. So I'm going to show you here. You just grab on to the hook, grab the yarn with the hook like that and pull it through. You've made 1 chain. Do it again. 3 and 4. Okay. After you've done about 4 chains, now you're going to grab one of your knitting needles and you're going to hold it up right against the yarn like that. I'm going to grab onto this chain for support and my needle. And now what you want to do is you're still going to make the chain, but you're taking your hook around the knitting needle like so, grabbing onto the yarn and making the chain. And then you're going to take the yarn to the back in between those two. So you'll notice how we've made a stitch onto the needle. Okay, let's see that one more time. Take the yarn to the back, again, pull through, take the yarn to the back. And so you're going to keep doing this to cast on to this needle with this scrap yarn the number of stitches that you need for your project. So for this demonstration, I'm only going to cast on 10 stitches. So let's see, 2, 4, 6, 8, take the yarn to the back, 9 and 10. After you've cast on the number of stitches, there should be a chain on the, or rather a stitch on the crochet hook itself, right? You're just going to make a few more chains. Now this time we're just making regular chains. We're not going around the knitting needle. So you're going to make about 3 or 4 chains and that's it. Pull the yarn through, go ahead and cut the yarn and pull it through. Don't tighten it too much because we're going to have to unravel it at this end. So don't tighten it too much, just enough. All right, and that's it. So we have our provisional cast on stitches on the with the scrap yarn on the needle, right? So these are not the actual stitches. Now we're going to use our actual yarn. So let's say my working yarn for my project is this one here, this variegated off-white brownish color yarn. Now I'm going to take my needle and now I actually start to knit with my regular yarn. So you want to start from the slip knot end. You want to start knitting from the slip knot end. So obviously for me it's easy since I'm using double pointed needles here. I could just move it over, but if you're not using double pointed needles, you may, or circular needles, you may want to transfer your stitches so that your working end is the slip knot end. And now we're just going to start knitting on here. So I'm going to insert my needle, just leave about a 4-inch tail or so, just make a loop like that, hook it on and knit and make sure you have your working yarn and not the tail, and continue to knit through those stitches. So now it's just like knitting, regular knitting, but this is your very first row. So if your project calls for a knit on the first row or something, then you could just do a knit, or it's always better to just pick up the stitches first using this technique, and then you can start following your pattern. All right, so we've picked up the stitches, and that's it. You're now going to keep knitting whatever your pattern calls for with this. Now, one thing I wanted to point out was that once you've made this last stitch on this non-slip knot end, we want to actually hold that stitch with a stitch marker. So what you want to do is you want to take a stitch marker and put it through the stitch that we just made, that last stitch that we just made, okay? Because that sort of holds it in place when we have to unravel it. And I'll actually show you how to unravel the stitches as well to pick these stitches back up. So that's it. We continue knitting on, and you'll just keep knitting through to your work till whatever your work reaches its desired length. And I'm going to stop this here and move over to my other sample where I've done exactly that. I have, let me get this out of the way. I have the provisional cast on, and you can see this was my scrap yarn. I have the slip knot end, non-slip knot end. I've captured the first stitch on this stitch marker, and I've knit up a little bit. Now let's say I'm ready to take off these stitches. What you want to do is you want to have your work like this, where your slip knot end is on this side and the non-slip knot end is on this side. We're first going to unravel this chain here, and this is why you don't want to have to tie that really tight, so that you can actually pull through this and start unraveling this scrap yarn. And of course I have split my yarn here, looks like, so no worries. I'm just going to snip it and start pulling through. And this is why it's good, because we already have our first stitch on this chain, right? So what you want to do is, because the first stitch is always a pain to get to, so you want to continue unraveling that piece of yarn through that first stitch. It's just going to be a little bit difficult on that first stitch, but after that it's going to be easy. So here, I've taken that off. These yarns just want to stick to each other. Okay, and I'm going to insert it through the right leg of that stitch. You see how the stitch is like this? I'm going to insert it through the right leg of that stitch. You can leave the marker on, or we can take it off. Let's just take it off to get it out of the way. Okay, and now you can see, if I can pull this, you can see the next stitch is right here, right? Here's the stitch, the right leg of the stitch, and then the left leg of the stitch is underneath here. So you're going to take your needle, insert it through the right leg of that stitch, and if you pull on this scrap yarn, it'll come off. We'll do the same thing for the next one. Find that next stitch, insert it through the right leg, pull. Now you can actually keep doing this for a few stitches and then pull the yarn all together. So let's see that. 1, find my next stitch, 2, and 3 maybe, and then pull. As long as you haven't split your yarn when you've knit, it should come off just fine. So now you'll see we've picked up 6 stitches. I'm going to go ahead and pick up the remaining 4. So here's 1, 2, 3, and 4. And be sure to just pick up the stitch and not pick up the stitch and the yarn, the scrap yarn, okay? And let's pull. There. And now we have our 10 stitches on the yarn, on the needle, right? So now we've picked up these stitches. These are live stitches. If you wanted to knit up something more on this end, now you can join yarn and start knitting it up. Or if you're ready to actually just, let's say this is a long band, let's say I make a hairband or something, I can then join these and seam these together using, for instance, the Kitchener stitch. I've provided a link to that in the description field as well if you're interested in that, in the seaming of these kinds of live stitches. So I think this type of a provisional cast on is another alternative to the chain method, and I hope you give this one a try on one of your upcoming projects. Thanks for watching. Happy knitting.